Hello there. Welcome to Blitz Transmissions. I'm Tommy, and this is the Blitzcast, episode 25. We're at a quarter of the way to 100 Blitzcast episodes. Before we get into the topic of this Blitzcast episode, make sure to check out all the links in the description below. Obviously, if you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe to Blitz Transmissions, as I have awesome Star Wars content coming out all the time. In addition to that, if you are a ARC Trooper in my Patreon, you would have seen this podcast early on Patreon. If you'd like access to that, monthly giveaways, other early content, and cool benefits, you can check out the link in the description below, as well as the link to my YouTube channel membership. If you just like the product reviews I do on the channel, you want to vote on what I review next and get early access to those, you can check out my Rancor Battalion channel membership. That's also linked in the description below, along with other stuff like my Discord, my Instagram, my Blitz Bounties Instagram page, my X page, all that good stuff is in the description below, all the links. So, it's been a week. I'm definitely on crunch time right now, so this might be another abbreviated episode of the Blitzcast. I spent the last probably 2 or 3 hours trying to figure out what the hell was going on with my laptop. I have a 6-year-old laptop, so I'm not, part of it is just I need to get rid of it and get a new device to record on. But I was having issues, and I've had this issue once in college where the storage on the local disk is just filling up and filling up and filling up. And the last time is because of malware, and I think that's what it was this time. My antivirus wasn't detecting anything, but that was what happened last time, because you click a link and like a download link, and it's fake on a website. I download like hundreds and hundreds of images of, toys and characters and things like that from Star Wars. Eventually, when you're doing like a, convert YouTube to MP3 sketch website, one of those is going to steer you the wrong way, and the next thing you know, you downloaded something you didn't want to download. So give me one, oh my goodness. Give me 1 second here. Wow, live news here. Wow. Okay, that's pretty crazy. In the midst of this, give me 1 second. Wow. I just got my press badges accepted for ICCCon 2025 in the midst of recording this Blitzcast episode. Wow, that's pretty awesome. So, Jen and I are officially going as press for ICCCon. I'm very excited. That just made my whole day. I wasn't expecting that email just now, especially after such a frustrating morning on the laptop trying to mess around with things. Yeah, wow. That's crazy. I'm texting Jen right now. Okay, cool. That's awesome. That's great news. So again, I'm way off my train of thought now. That's awesome. Got accepted for press. Blitz Transmissions, me and Jen, will be going to ICCCon 2025 as press. What we're going to do when we get there is we're going to be vlogging, doing all that cool stuff, whatever. Check out ICCCon. I have a whole channel in my Discord for ICCCon. That just totally derailed my whole train of thought. So, aside from that, definitely huge shout outs to Michael Havens and ICCCon. It's the best convention ever, especially being a Star Wars fan, a Star Wars collector. You feel so at home there, and there's no real way to say it otherwise. So, thank you to ICCCon. Thank you to Michael and his wife, who I know does the press passes, for accepting us to cover the convention. Pretty cool stuff. Okay, back to our regularly scheduled programming after that awesome surprise. I literally can't believe that moment just happened on camera, which is awesome. I totally just geeked out over that. Basically, what we're looking at right here is a week that's been, light on Star Wars news again, as I'm still trying to gather my thoughts here. Something I do want to give a shout out to is Black Series Cantina. Mike Case and Zach, the hosts of Black Series Cantina, they had me on their podcast. We did the live show. If you were in my Patreon, you actually would have been able to watch their exclusive live show that they opened the doors to my Patreon in tandem with their own Patreon. So thank you to Mike and Zach for doing that. I was on there. We did like a 3-hour-long podcast. It was a blast. Hugely honored to have been a guest on that podcast, as it's a very well-known podcast, especially in the Star Wars Black Series collecting community. Those guys are awesome. I really wanted to give them a shout out. You can check out their episode. It's actually out now as this has been released. Theirs is already out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you name it. If you want to watch it with video on YouTube, you can check out their Patreon and get involved with all that good stuff to watch it. I believe it's like certain tiers and up on their Patreon. You get to watch their YouTube versions of their podcast. It was a blast. We talked about a lot of cool stuff. Talked about some number crunching as far as, Star Wars collecting goes. Hasbro, with royalties and licensing fees, things of that nature. So it was a really good talk, and those guys are awesome. And I also got to be the winner of my figure I voted for won the vote for the next Hall of Fame. I won't say what it is. You're going to have to check out the Black Series Cantina Instagram for the figure that's the next entry into their Black Series Hall of Fame. In addition to that, I also released a video this past week that kind of, for a channel of my size, blew up. It's sitting at over 2,000 views as of the recording of this podcast. It's pretty exciting to see a video that was really just me sitting down and sharing my thoughts do so well. It was a video about something that really, as far as the collecting and the hobby goes, really was starting to weigh on my mind, so much so that I felt I wanted to just sit down and just talk in front of the camera. A little bit different than some of my other cut commentaries I've done on the channel. Usually I'll put up some background music, or it's a lot more chopped up and a lot more scripted. This one was really just, I had some stuff planned out that I wanted to talk about. I had some research done ahead of time, but it was really just me talking, just more organically, more so like this, whereas this is completely uncut. Usually the cut commentaries are very chopped up, and that one had a lot more of just continuous talking, because when I start going. Those who know me know I'm a certified yapper, so that was a great video to see it do well on the channel, and that was actually a huge topic of discussion on Black Series Cantina, and a lot of my friends have been reaching out to me saying they really enjoyed the video, so I wanted to thank everybody for checking out that video. And if you subscribe to the channel because of that video, and this is your first experience with the Blitzcast, this series is so much more off the cuff. I used to do another YouTube channel where podcasting was like the main thing that we did, and I really fell in love with like the weekly podcast. So the Blitzcast isn't really something that I market per se on the channel, like definitely not as hard as some of my other content, whether it be action figure collecting, just Star Wars news, rumors, whatever. This is just kind of me scratching that itch of that thing that I was always passionate about in the beginning of my content creating career, was, just podcasts, just uncut, off the cuff, laid back, casual podcast. Every time I say the word casual, by the way, I think of my friend Casual Clone. Your Casual Clone. He's an action figure customizer on Instagram. He's awesome. Go check him out. He does some masterful work. He's out of Germany. Such a cool dude. Such a down-to-earth guy. So shout out to you. Casual Clone, if you're watching, shout out to you, man. So that video, check that out. You don't even have to be a fan of like Star Wars action figures. I think that, a lot of people that aren't even really in the hobby contacted me and said they really loved it. So I appreciate all the support you guys have been giving me on that. Let's see. So the topic this week that I wanted to talk about, as we're sitting about 2 months away from Andor Season 2, and this is just that time of year. There's really a drought, where it's a drought with the content as far as media goes. It's a drought as far as sorry, I reset my computer today. That was part of my whole computer thing, and now I'm all off kilter because my computer is the screen goes to sleep. That's the word I was looking for, sleep. Let's see. Power and sleep settings. When plugged in, turn off never. There we go. Sorry. Literally, guys, I'm so sorry about all this. This is such a crazy episode. I got thrown off because of the whole press badge, acceptance thing, and then I got that going on right now. I had to completely re-download all my apps that I use and things like that. Anyways, back to, again, this is completely off the cuff. I don't chop any of this up. I don't believe in it. Unless, of course, I have to get up and walk away for some reason, then I'll chop up the footage. But this week's topic on the Blitzcast, I really wanted to talk about almost like an extension of what I talked about on my video on Monday, talking about the main subject of that is is Star Wars collecting getting too expensive for everyone, or is it just that some of us, a loud minority in the community, just can't afford to keep up with it as much as they used to or at all, and they're kind of taking out their misery on everybody else in the hobby? And part of that, with some of the comments and reactions I saw to that video, conversations and debates I got to have with people, kind of brought me to this other topic, which is something else I've been wanting to talk about on the channel a lot, and that's the topic of fatigue, fandom fatigue, I'll call it. And that's, I think, a very big thing with Star Wars. Star Wars is a very unique franchise, and I think it's honestly one of its biggest core strengths, while also being one of the biggest drama causers in the fandom. It's been like this for decades now. As we reach almost half a century from the release of Episode 4, A New Hope. Star Wars 77, as some of you hipsters might call it. We have this generational passing of the torch of Star Wars. Your first generation was your original trilogy, and then your expanded universe novels like Shadows of the Empire, Dark Empire, The Heir to the Empire, all that good stuff that came out in the 80s and 90s. And then the next generation is kind of your prequel kids, your Clone Wars kids. Those I kind of do into two subsections of fandom. But I also feel like in general that age group can still be lumped together, because a lot of people like me, I had the prequels growing up as long as I can remember. I had the 2003 Clone Wars, which I identify my childhood fandom with, but mostly it's the 2008 Clone Wars. So you had those two generations. We all know the drama that happened with that, and I've talked about it before on the channel. You're familiar with all the stuff that happened with Ahmed Best and Jake Lloyd, and older fans thinking that the prequel trilogy was going to mature with the kids that grew up with the OT, those kids being older now. There was an assumption, but instead it got sillier in a lot of ways. It didn't take itself as seriously as the original trilogy did. And even though, there's plenty of humor in the original trilogy, but it's definitely kidified, I guess I'll call it, in the prequel trilogy. And then, of course, you have, your sequel trilogy being the next generation, and we all are very familiar, now that we live in the era of the internet and social media, of what happened with the reception to those three movies. And it's still a very prominent conversation for some godforsaken reason in the fandom. And then we have the Disney Plus era. I consider that almost like how I consider the 2008 Clone Wars generation to be different than the prequel generation. I consider there to be a small divide between the sequel trilogy generation of fans and the Disney Plus era generation of fans. And that's been a pretty mixed bag for a lot of people. There have been some hits, there have been some misses. And I feel like it's different for everyone. Me personally, I feel like the only series that I don't like, because there's no Star Wars that I would say I don't like. I know Shill, he's a fence rider. But if there was any Star Wars that I really wasn't a fan of, I won't go back and watch nearly as much as any of the other Disney Plus stuff, it's definitely The Acolyte and Tales of the Empire. I don't see myself rewatching Tales of the Empire ever, and unless I was doing a watch through of it on purpose. But The Acolyte, I'll at least throw on the fifth episode where all those awesome fight scenes are, or the duel between Sol and Chimere in the 8th and final episode of that series. You also have, but other than that, I know plenty of people, especially on Tales of the Empire, there are plenty of people that disagree with me on that. I know a lot of people that really enjoy Tales of the Empire, and for a lot of people, that's a series they enjoy just as much as Tales of the Jedi. And so it's kind of fun for me, because everything else I enjoyed. I didn't love everything, but at least I could sit and enjoy it. I think my favorites right now would probably be Ahsoka, The Mandalorian, and Skeleton Crew. Definitely Skeleton Crew. That is such a great series. So kind of what I wanted to talk about here is fandom fatigue, and how it applies to Star Wars, how it applies to some other franchises as well, because I've been on both sides of the fence. For me, I think that it was... I think for me, the MCU is really the biggest example I can think of a fandom where I got fandom fatigue, and I actually ended up walking away, and I have never dove back into MCU when I bowed out. Pretty much completely. I'll cherry pick here and there. I'll go see a movie with friends, or I'll go watch I'll watch a new limited series or something every once in a while. But for the most part, dude, I do not care at all for MCU stuff. I really don't. It's not that I don't like it. It's not that it's just, I think with the MCU, they created this formula where it was just movies. And, as you watched more of the movies, stuff kind of intertwined. You'd have your end credit scenes that would tease, 3 movies in the future. And then you would see the kind of the dots connect. You'd have your little references and little inside jokes made that referenced prior movies. And it was fun. And that's kind of those Easter eggs and those fan service moments. That's stuff you get in every movie franchise. I think what happened was Disney Plus came along because streaming, everybody in 2019 to 2021, 2022, everyone all of a sudden, every company had to have a streaming service with exclusive stuff and blah blah blah. Whereas I remember before it was literally just Netflix forever. It was just Netflix, and then all of a sudden, right around the time I started college, it became this. Everybody had a streaming service and a streaming platform. So it then became with the MCU, with the the introduction of Disney Plus, you started having all these series jump in. And I think for me personally, I was already lukewarm on MCU after Endgame, because for me, Endgame was the closing chapter for a lot of my favorite characters. My favorites in the MCU were Captain America, Iron Man, Hawkeye, Black Panther. Those are probably my 4 biggest ones I could think of off the top of my head. And, Captain America, his story ends, at least the Steve Rogers version. The Iron Man dies in that movie, so, his story's over. And then they started releasing the Disney Plus series. And, I was keeping up at first. I loved WandaVision. I liked Captain America and the Winter Soldier. I liked, or not Captain America, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And then at the end it becomes, I watched Hawkeye, loved Hawkeye, watched Moon Knight, loved Moon Knight. After Moon Knight, I kind of just stopped watching. I never watched Loki. And then it just kind of fell off from there. And I think it was because of oversaturation of what was coming out. It was so much stuff coming out that you couldn't keep up, because then at the same time you had The Mandalorian, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Book of Boba Fett, Andor, Tales of the Jedi, Star Wars Visions. It was just bang, 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 just a constant stream of Star Wars shows and Marvel shows. And if you're trying to be a fan of both and you're trying to juggle, watching everything, and then on my end of things, early in 2021, I started doing content, and you're trying to keep up with the Star Wars stuff and really analyze it, watch it multiple times, not to mention animated shows too, the Bad Batch is coming out, and you got the Marvel What If series. And I feel like something just had to give, and obviously I'm way more into Star Wars than I am MCU. But but I think that for me is a perfect example of fandom fatigue. It is not that I dislike the MCU. I would definitely, like, if I had the time, and that's part of it, is I just don't have the time in my adult life to watch all of those shows, and especially doing the catch up now of having to like try and, get caught up with everything so I can continue to watch more. Another one that I loved was Shang-Chi. That movie was awesome, by the way. Definitely go watch that. Yeah, it was just difficult for me to keep up. And so I made the decision over time. It wasn't like I sat down one day and said, I'm swearing off the MCU. No, it just gradually over time, I missed a show or I stopped watching. And, then the next thing came out. And I was like, I still haven't watched the last show. I won't even bother. And honestly, I think in a way, Disney shot themselves in the foot with that. And I think that it's good that here in 2025, they've made the decision to pull back on the volume of series that are coming out. It'll give a lot of people an opportunity to catch up on a lot of the older stuff. I don't think I will when it comes to MCU. But at least with Star Wars, like, it gives me an opportunity to kind of breathe and really kind of digest a lot of the content that's been coming out over the last like 2, 3, 4 years. And I kind of feel like at ease in a way, if that makes sense, that I get to just enjoy the content that's already been out. I get to rewatch stuff. I don't have to be so focused on, okay, now I got to hurry up and cover the next show. I got to, week to week, I got to make sure I watch this episode like at least 3 times, take my notes and like really pay attention to the Easter eggs and stuff. As fun as that is, it gets tiring. You get that fatigue doing that, especially as a content creator, doing it over and over and over again. And you kind of lose sight of what you love about the franchise. And that's a huge part of fandom fatigue. If you love a fandom, if you love something about a fandom, you are going to, be a little more forgiving. You have those rose-tinted glasses on when you're watching the content. But when it's just so oversaturated, it kind of all just melds together. And it becomes difficult to enjoy stuff and appreciate stuff as much. For me, that's literally what it comes down to with the MCU. Juxtapose that to Star Wars. I think it can cause a lot of people to have a similar reaction. I know plenty of people that really it was the same kind of like gradual decision. You choose the fandom that you like more over the other. And for a lot of people, they chose the MCU over Star Wars because that's just what they like more. There's nothing wrong with that. Even though Star Wars is clearly better. It's just one of those that I feel has almost been like confused with like apathy. Like I don't think that fandom fatigue and apathy are the same thing, because apathy is just you don't care at all. And I think that for a lot of casual fans, like I think they do care about like Star Wars and, whatever their favorite fandom is. It's just hard to keep up because our lives are so busy. Every other company has a streaming service. We have work, we have families, we have responsibilities, other things going on in our lives. And in the meantime, we have this, this constant, stream of just bang, 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 rapid fire, just show, movie, limited series. And it also waters down the content that's coming out. Because I will say, in the midst of all this rigmarole of, all these series coming out, specifically for Star Wars, you could kind of see, like, over time, like, The Mandalorian started really strong, and then we had Mando Season 2, Bad Batch was really strong, and then over time, and obviously part of this was because of, like, behind-the-scenes stuff with Gina Carano being fired and the narrative having to change of the whole Mandoverse. It kind of like got a little bit watered down with like Obi-Wan Kenobi and Book of Boba Fett. And for me, those shows are like middle of the pack of my enjoyment of the Disney Plus series. I don't love them like more than anything, but I definitely like them, and I have action figures from the shows, and like I enjoyed them enough. But it was you could kind of notice, like, I think part of it was they had a deadline. Like, hey, we're making this next. We got to have another show. We got to constantly have shows so people keep those subscriptions for the Disney Plus. And instead, you just, got a lot of fans got upset about the lack of expected quality that came with a lot of those series. And I think that, a lot of people in the fandom don't express it very well because there's that fandom fatigue. But some people are just immature and don't know how to use their words. But I think that a lot of people are valid in how they feel about some of these shows. That they feel like they were watered down. They feel like they were rushed. You can kind of tell it's not discreet in some of these shows when things got moved around and things are rushed or omitted or reshot at the very last second. So back to the fandom fatigue thing. What I do think fandom fatigue can kind of become, I think it can be a slippery slope, because you can get fatigued with a fandom and not be as happy with some of the stuff that's coming out or not be able to keep up. And then because you're not keeping up, you kind of get caught up in like the more negative grifting side of the internet, the rage bait, clickbaiting stuff. That a lot of us get caught up in, whether it's like, you feel the need to comment because it's so stupid, or you feel the need to comment because it's like, oh, well, that explains why I feel the way I feel. Whereas I think a big part of it with Star Wars, I think it's less so that, I know it's been spun to be like, oh, the fandom is so injured and hurt, we're like a wounded gazelle and the corporate Disney is trying to kick out the fans. I think it's more just, we were getting like watered down stories that like weren't as entertaining for general audience, not even just for like the real fans, quote unquote. But like it was just for just the general viewer. Like, it's like, what significance does this have to what I'm watching? And I think it's a slippery slope, because then you have people that it starts as fatigue. And then for some people, it becomes apathy. And then that, depending on, what kind of content you watch on YouTube and things like that, that can very quickly turn into disdain towards the franchise. And I think fandom fatigue can cause some it can make you not even like the whole franchise, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It can make you start to dislike the whole franchise and forget about the things that you do love about the franchise. There's the whole, saying that I've heard a million people say, and I'm sure you have too, on different opinion videos and stuff like that. And again, it doesn't just apply to Star Wars. You hear it a million times. Oh, Star Wars is like a restaurant. If you go to a restaurant, you're not going to pick the dish that you don't like and do nothing but complain about the dish you don't like. You're going to buy the dish that you like and you're going to eat it. And it's going to be good, blah, blah, blah. Which I think is a true like analogy. I think it's a great analogy. But it's repeated so often that I don't think it holds as much value anymore, because it's kind of, for most people, it's like in one ear, out the other. I think it's important for fandom fatigue to remedy it with, what's your medicine for fandom fatigue, I guess I would say. I think it's going back and watching the stuff that you do love. I think that's where, even though, I think it's an overused analogy, it doesn't mean it's not true. And I think that it definitely is something that a lot of, specifically Star Wars fans, kind of need to look back at. And especially if you're burned out on the new Star Wars stuff, go back. Watch the stuff that you love. Watch the stuff you grew up watching and you have a lot of nostalgia for. Watch the stuff you have those rose-tinted glasses for. I love the Clone Wars. I love the prequel trilogy, and it's what I grew up with. Does that mean that it's the best Star Wars ever? Hell no. I will be the first person to tell you that I do not think that the Clone Wars series or the prequel trilogy is the objectively best Star Wars ever made. I think they have some of the best moments in all of Star Wars, but the projects as a whole, I'm not going to sit here and try and pretend that they're the best things that have ever come out. But I'll watch them all the time. If I have time to sit down and rewatch something, I'll choose to rewatch something that I've watched 1,000 times over the newest MCU show, or because I have that nostalgia for it. And honestly, watching stuff that I haven't seen in a while honestly like gives me like a sense of joy. Like it's like, oh, I forgot how much I liked this part, or oh man, I forgot how much I enjoyed that character. This actually just happened for me, definitely not like a childhood thing, but Jen and I are almost done watching through the entire canon Star Wars timeline on screen. So we're going through the thick of Resistance right now. We finished season 1. We're going to watch episode 8, The Last Jedi, watch season 2, and then watch episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, and then I've already been caught up. I'm a real fan. Jen will be caught up on everything Star Wars. She has seen literally everything that's canon on screen since the beginning episodes of Tales of the Jedi, in order, all the way down to where we're in the depths of the sequel trilogy and Resistance. When I was watching The Force Awakens with Jen, maybe like not even a week ago, I'm watching it and I'm like, wow, like I really forgot like how much I enjoyed parts of this movie. And honestly, I would say I really enjoy The Force Awakens as a whole. Like it, and a part of that, kind of takes you back to when I went with my dad opening night at the movie theater to go see Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. And just the cool stuff, the Kylo Ren's crossguard lightsaber, his little freakouts on the Star Destroyer or at Starkiller Base, General Hugs, as he's called later in Episode 8. I love Rey's theme. There's something about when Rey is scavenging on Jakku and she's sliding down the hill on her makeshift sled and Rey's theme starts playing. I'm like, wow, that just like brought me back. It was like a time capsule. I like went back in time. Like Anton Ego, I remembered his name this time, not like a previous episode of the Blitzcast, from Ratatouille, the critic. It was cool to just like have that moment where you kind of get pulled back to a positive memory. And I think that is the feeling that our fandom should invoke in us. If you're so focused on the stuff that you're not happy with and that you're not enjoying, it's going to make you a miserable person. And I see people like that on the internet all the time. People who are nothing but miserable. And it's because all they do is focus on what they don't like. You're making, out of a 30-day month, you make 20 videos about the show that you don't like. Obviously, part of that is because it's going to get more clicks than talking about a show you did enjoy. But even if if the content creation is your thing and your goal is to make money and get views, and that's your thing. But don't forget about the stuff you do like, and maybe in your free time even just take a seat, watch a little bit of a movie, watch an episode of a show you like, and give yourself that hit of serotonin that you need. Because it really helps with my perspective on the fandom all the time. There's a lot of times I'll go back and I pick and choose the stuff I enjoy. I definitely don't enjoy Resistance as much as some other shows, but there's stuff I like in Resistance. Even stuff as simple as like Commander Pyre, the Gold Stormtrooper. He's cool. I like his design, and when he's on screen, my eyes go right to him. He's a cool character. It just is what I have his action figure. He's a cool character. I like him. It was cool too watching Resistance because the final 2 episodes of season 1 happened during the events of The Force Awakens. So it was really cool to like watch up until those last 2 episodes, then watch The Force Awakens, then watch the 2-part finale of season 1. It was like kind of the same vibes almost as when you're watching like, okay, we're going to get to the Siege of Mandalore arc in the Clone Wars Season 7. We're going to watch that first episode, and then we're going to go watch Revenge of the Sith, and then come back and finish Clone Wars, because that's as close as chronological as you're going to get without watching the 4.5-hour cut of Revenge of the Sith, where Bad Batch and Clone Wars are all thrown in there. It's like, it's fun. It's like, we're jumping back and forth and you're seeing different characters' perspectives of the same events. And it honestly it honestly made me enjoy Resistance just a little bit more as a whole, just because of little things like that. And ultimately that's a big thing that fandom fatigue can do is, it can cause you to lose sight of what you love about the franchise. And I think that rings true for any hobby, anything that you watch or collect, or, anything that you enjoy. If you're oversaturating it in your life and it becomes more of a chore to watch the next show or buy the next action figure, and it doesn't bring you that like childlike sense of wonder, then it's probably just not for you. You know, that's really what it comes down to. And I think fandom fatigue for me is a very, very important topic and I don't know if I'm the first person to coin the phrase. I've never seen anybody else talk about fandom fatigue. But I think it can make you bitter, and it can make you bitter towards other fans, especially if they like something that you don't like. And it honestly, I feel like it hurts conversation, and fandom fatigue can cause the echo chamber effect, because once you don't like something, you're going to seek out other people who have the same opinion as you. And then we get this stupid us versus them mentality about things in the fandom. And like, obviously, you're entitled. If you don't like a creator, that's fine. If you hate their content, that's fine. You're entitled to your opinion. But then we go as far as to start like belittling each other and bullying each other, and firing shots at each other. And it's like, this all stems from us adults. Always it's adults losing their minds on each other over a fictional franchise, fictional universe. And I think it all stems from, at least for one side of it, because there is toxic positivity and everything like that. And I think that fandom fatigue is a huge root cause of things that happen in this fandom. Star Wars specifically, I think it definitely rings true. I guess to wrap up my thoughts on this one, like I said, it's going to be a shorter episode of the Blitzcast, just because I'm crunched for time right now, because I got to hurry up and upload this so I can get ready for work. But yeah, it's just one of those where I feel it's more of just like being an adult and being mindful of yourself and being self-reflective. Being able to recognize when you are losing yourself in the fandom, in this thing that's supposed to be your escape from real life. It's supposed to be the thing you enjoy. If you catch yourself and all you're doing is being negative, and you're focusing on the things you don't like, and you're never even mentioning the things you do like because you're so focused on talking about what you hate, it sours it for you, and it can ruin your perception of the entire thing that you love. Because again, it's I sound like Yoda. Fatigue leads to apathy. Apathy leads to disdain. Disdain leads to the dark side. But I think it's true though. It's a domino effect. We find ourselves in this position where we feel so attached to what we grew up with our fandom and what we remember so fondly because we wear those rose-tinted glasses, that we feel like we have ownership over the content. We don't. And part of the reality is that, generations change, people's mindsets change as time goes on. It's a pendulum, swings back and forth. And sometimes that new content isn't going to be exactly what we envisioned in our minds, whether it's like newer stuff in the timeline or older stuff in the timeline, sequels, prequels, you name it. It's not always going to be what we imagined it to be. Like for me, I think that's why I don't like Tales of the Empire, to be honest with you. I had in my head what happened to Barriss Offee after the events of the Clone Wars. She has an awesome arc in the Clone Wars Season 5 where she, bombs the Jedi Temple, gets Ahsoka framed for it, steals Asajj Ventress's lightsabers, and duels Anakin friggin' Skywalker at the Jedi Temple. She gets locked away, and all those years, we never see her in Rebels. We never find out what happens to her. And I think for myself and many other fans, it was just the headcanon of, yeah, she probably became an Inquisitor like so many other fallen Jedi. Which she did, and that was such a strong start. And then because of the format of Tales of the Empire, she very quickly she unbecomes an Inquisitor. And then she's a good guy. And there's like mention that she got to talk to Ahsoka, but we never get to see it on screen. And I just wasn't happy with the way that story was told. And I can understand how original trilogy kids would feel that way about Luke Skywalker's handling in the sequel trilogy. I can understand how original trilogy fans can feel that way about the character of Anakin Skywalker or Boba Fett in the prequel trilogy. I can understand how prequel fans would feel how they feel when it comes to characters like Boba Fett and Cad Bane in the Book of Boba Fett. Because we all develop these images in our heads, and we have these headcanons of what these characters should be. And then we're left with that disappointment when it doesn't pan out how we wanted it to. But I think, for me, Tales of the Empire is a great example, again, because I didn't like Tales of the Empire. I didn't like how they handled Barriss. But it is what it is. I just won't go back and rewatch it. Whatever. It is. Yeah, it doesn't affect me at the end of the day. And if a Barriss Ophi action figure comes out, you better believe I'm going to buy it, because I like Barriss Ophi before Tales of the Empire. And when I put that action figure on my shelf, I can still enjoy the character that Barriss was before her current canon story has been told. And I think that is something we need to be mindful of as a fandom as well. And I think it's a good remedy for fandom fatigue. But yeah, I guess that's it, you know? What is it? I know some of you guys are going to flame me. What is Rose Tico's line in The Last Jedi that we all make fun of? Instead of fighting what you hate, save what you love, or something like that. It's true. Maybe not in the circumstances she was saying it in. But I think as far as like saving our love for the fandom, I do think it's save yourself from fandom fatigue. If you aren't enjoying stuff that's coming out, remind yourself of how much you love older stuff. I think my dad has a great point that he made about that. It's something that's always stuck with me. I remember back in 2019 when The Mandalorian came out, and my dad and I were loving season 1. You know, we're preparing to go into the theater, and we're preparing to watch episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, in theaters. And as we're walking in, my dad looks at me and he says, "You know what? Even if this movie is the worst Star Wars movie I've ever seen or will ever see, I have The Mandalorian." And that was for current media. That's not, you know, I think that same logic can apply for anything in Star Wars that you love or in any fandom. And I think that is a very important thing to keep in mind. You know, my dad going into it knew he wasn't a fan of The Last Jedi, knew he probably wasn't going to be a fan of The Rise of Skywalker. But he went into it knowing, you know what, even if I don't like this, there is Star Wars that I am enjoying. And we got to continue to share that love for The Mandalorian together. And that's something that I think that's a healthy mindset, that is a good model mindset for people in any fandom. You know, if you want to keep up with stuff and you want to watch the stuff, you want to collect the things, do it. But if something's not doing it for you, focus on what you love doing. And that's pretty much it, guys. That's my hippy-dippy, sissy snowflake conclusions to this week's episode of the Blitzcast. Guys, if you enjoyed this episode, again, make sure to subscribe if you're not yet subscribed. Check out all the links in the description below as well. Make sure to check out Black Series Cantina and get your tickets for ICC Con so you can meet me and Jen. And I'll, sign your ankles or something. But yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Blitzcast. I'll catch you for the next one, and may the Force be with you.
Breaking all units, fire at will. 1-2, pick a target. Too many, Captain. Watch your stabilizer, Gold 6. Anybody cover me. I got 2 vultures on my tail. Gotta hold them here. Watch your left. I can't shake them. I'm hit. Where's our reinforcements?